Alright, let's see how many times I can get this wrong. Today I wanted to do a video on panpsychism, the observer effect, and relationships. Basically how you kind of interact with objects in the known world. The very first topic to cover is panpsychism, and the reason I wanted to start at such a weird word is to ultimately diffuse some myths and some, how do I say this? We're not thinking about the problem of consciousness appropriately. I'm not saying consciousness is a problem to solve, it's just that we're not even looking at each other correctly. And I think panpsychism is one of the ultimate manifestations of how we have essentially just kept chasing our own hubris on this one. And we humans. The second one would be the observer effect. I like to use Einstein. Einstein was really clever, but his thought experiment when it comes to the observer effect was pretty good. It's very easy to understand and easy to absorb. But for me, I know when I was first introduced to it in college, I spent a lot of time on it. Took a lot of time for me to soak up. And finally, relationships. How do we actually interact with objects and each other? I don't mean relationships, and maybe I do to a certain extent in the social sense. But what exactly is a mathematical equivalence? What is a relationship? What does that look like in the physical world? And then what does that look like with respect to consciousness? Objects just kind of like going, or, wait, that wasn't even in frame, but, objects just kind of like hitting stuff. Or maybe we actually have a conscious creature observing an object, going overhead. And that's just kind of what I'm getting at. My time is 2.5 minutes, so the very first is panpsychism. I'm going to have a link in the bottom of the description to one of my more favorite videos that talks about panpsychism. I reviewed it this morning. Lex Fridman and some other gentlemen are just kind of going over contemporary thoughts around panpsychism. Obviously, Lex is the interviewer, and then some guy is talking about panpsychism as he sees it. Now, he does a good job of explaining what panpsychism is, but ultimately what it gives us is the most arbitrary way of explaining things. I think one of the most gruesome wounds that has been dealt to academia has been bureaucracy. Moore put it pretty well. Bureaucracy is just form without meaning. And I think panpsychism is a pretty good demonstration of that. To say everything is conscious, such as this ball or this cup of coffee, does us no good. My immediate thought experiment would be a funeral. Try explaining panpsychism to someone whose relative just died, and that the person in the casket is conscious. Again, we keep adding words to things. And when I choose to talk about panpsychism first, this is a plea to fucking stop adding words to things that don't need additional words. Observer effect. This is actually how you, the subjective agent inside, can begin to understand how you are experiencing the world around you. So, for instance, the way we begin to do that is observing how other objects move through the world. I've spent a few videos now talking about two-dimensional, three-dimensional objects, how they pass through things like time. Now I need you to understand how the objects around you are moving in relation to you. Okay? You are in constant, excuse me. I'm going to finish up on the observer effect. I got 5. The observer effect, as Einstein liked to talk about it, is that you cannot take a snapshot of time. Whether you like to believe it or not, you can't, put time into a photo as if you can look at one and see what happened in the past. You can't take a snapshot. Everything is completely relative to the observer. He did this in many ways, and my favorite example was probably the train example. For instance, so you got someone moving in a train, you're standing still, and an event happens over in the distance. How are these two people perceiving the event? One's moving faster, one's moving not at all. And this is ultimately to help us realize that everything is in movement, always, in relationship to something else. That's just how it works. That's the observer effect. Consciousness, objects, waves, particles, they all behave. They all conform to the laws of physics. Panpsychism attempts to say that the egg, consciousness, preceded the chicken, reality. Those kinds of words don't get us anywhere. And the more time we spend on ideas of thought like that, the more time we detract on real, not just real world problems, but actual science. Because we are not thinking about the problems or the subject matter, not even anywhere close to a human way, or anywhere close to what academia was doing in the past. Finishing up with relationships, rather than my diatribe. Your consciousness works in exactly the same way. Remember, all that you are is what your attention is on with respect to time and space. You are a ring. You satisfy this function, not to put it superfluously, but you satisfy and you collapse the wave function. At any given moment in time, as you are passing through it, you are having experiences, whether they are being internal experiences themselves, or whether they are, you're reacting to your external environment. And whether you like to understand this or not at this point, you are in a constant relationship with those internal and external forces. QED.